Hi, my name is Maddie and welcome back to the Anti-Alienation Project. I'm glad you're here. What I talk about on my project is something called parental alienation. This is a type of child psychological and domestic abuse by proxy, and I went through it for 20 years. What is parental alienation? It involves one angry, spiteful parent, often during a custody dispute or a divorce, who manipulates their child and goes on an obsessive rampage to turn their child against their other loving parent without true justification. This happened to me, and when my parents divorced at the age of 9, I was made to believe terrible lies about my dad, that he was to my mom, that he had narcissistic personality disorder, that he doesn't love me. For the next 20 years, I rejected my dad. I could have had a loving relationship with him the whole time. 2 years ago, I learned the term parental alienation. Since last summer, I've been speaking out against this form of abuse. I want everybody in society to know what this is. It should not have taken 20 years for me to learn the term parental alienation and put the pieces of my life together. Today's video is going to be a video addressing Tina Swithin. And I've gotten a few comments after I post the videos of, why are you talking about this woman? Why are you giving her the time of day? I don't like how you're critical of this woman, etc. This woman, she asks underage kids, teens, adolescents, who were alienated from their parent. She asks them to come to her and share their stories. She's exploiting their trauma and abuse. She's making money off of alienated kids, denigrating their other parent online, propagating the lies that they've been made to believe. It's terrible.
I'm going to share multiple videos of children being taken to reunification camps.
Here are more examples of Tina allegedly exploiting minors. If I were an alienated teenager back then, speaking publicly on this 50-year-old's platform about how much I don't love my dad or how much I hate my dad, how do you come back from that? When you tell yourself something enough times, you believe it. When you tell the world something on this social media influencer's platform, while she makes money off of you, by the way, you're enforcing it so much. How do you ever put your pride aside and question whether you were right after that? I feel so bad for these kids. And not only does she exploit alienated kids, if that weren't enough, she's also leading hundreds of thousands of women to either believe or just propagate the lie that parental alienation, get this, that parental alienation is just a strategy that abusive fathers use in court to get their children back. It's not real. It doesn't happen. I didn't live through what I lived through. And she's actually changing laws, you guys. She's passing legislation that bans reunification therapy, which is trying to reunify the child, the targeted parent and the child. Legislation that uses any false allegations, any past charges as evidence to not have custody. You can go read Caden's Law, or also known as Peaky's Law. They've been trying to pass it in every state. It's already been passed in my state. So she's very dangerous, in my opinion, allegedly, in my opinion. So somebody sent me this email, and we're going to read it together. Before I read the email, I want to point out one thing that I see that Tina Swithin does a lot. She's very black and white thinker. Very much. Okay, so here's the thing. Alienation, this abuse, absolutely real. Absolutely real. At the same time, two things can be true. It's not black and white. It's not this exists or this doesn't. That's not how it works. Here is the truth, in my opinion. Yes, the abuse I went through, known as parental alienation, is absolutely real, devastating, horrible, destructive form of abuse. At the same time, there might be some people in court who make claims, false claims of alienation. Both things are true at the same time. Just because some people can exploit a term and make a false accusation doesn't mean that abuse doesn't exist. And it's a slap in the face to every parent, child, and family member, friends that have been affected when you say it's pseudoscience, when you say it's not real. Here's the email. Divorcing a narcissist, support, connection, and strategy. It's called Lemonade Wisdom. So here's Tina's Lemonade Wisdom. I'm so excited to learn some stuff. Hello, warrior mamas. In our world right now, there is a great division. She's right, there is a great division. Probably worse than I have ever seen in my 50 years on this planet. I have personally witnessed and experienced fractures within the advocacy community over the past year. It's been deeply painful on many levels. It's also been deeply painful for me, Tina, to figure out 2 years ago that I had been through this and then almost immediately learn that you and many other feminist coalitions deny the suffering that I and millions of other children have been through. She says, there is a big topic that divides us, and we cannot afford this division. That is the divide between, 1, those who use the term, and she puts it in quotes, alienation, and 2, those who understand why we should, in italicized font, never use that word. Last year, I publicly drew a line in the sand. I was done arguing with people who thought I was being silly because I was getting caught up on a word or that I was being too picky about terminology. It's so much bigger than that, and it's a conversation we must continue to have, okay? Let's start with the history. Alienation is a debunked concept based on Dr. Richard Gardner's clinical observations, not scientific data, and is not recognized by the UN, the APA, or the World Health Organization. Let's start with that. Tina, I don't know if you know this, but at one point, multiple personality disorder wasn't recognized by the UN or the APA or the World Health Organization. Does that mean that doesn't exist? I don't know if you know this, but at one point, the fictitious disorder imposed on another was not accepted by the UN or the APA or the World Health Organization. Does that mean that fictitious disorder imposed on another isn't real? I would really like to know the answer to that question. Let's break it down further. She's using these big names, the UN, the WHO, the APA. She's using that as a reason why the abuse I went through doesn't exist. The abuse I experienced is actually already recognized in the DSM. Yeah, child psychological abuse. There you have it. It is child psychological abuse, and it can already be diagnosed as such. Also, there's an argument that parental alienation syndrome isn't in the DSM or recognized by the UN or the WHO. Actually, I don't want it to be recognized by these organizations, at least not the parental alienation syndrome part. I don't believe it is a syndrome. A syndrome is something that happens without an identifiable cause. And we can pinpoint the identifiable cause for this abuse. It's the parent who is abusing the child. Her second argument is that Gardner believed that society was too punitive when it came to adults having sexual relations with children. Let's address this. The whole Richard Gardner thing, let's address it. Not only is that an ad hominem attack against Richard Gardner, but also parental alienation, the framework he came up with, I disagree with. I don't think it is a syndrome like I mentioned previously. But more importantly than that, parental alienation is not a new phenomenon. It's not a new form of abuse that Richard Gardner came up with. This has actually been described in legal cases since the early 1800s. I don't know if you know, but Einstein was a targeted parent. He was alienated from his kids. Scientific literature going back to the 1940s describing this before Richard Gardner came up with parental alienation syndrome. The concept of PA has been acknowledged and addressed in English-speaking courts for the last 200 years. Parental alienation is not a new phenomenon. It's not a new form of abuse that Richard Gardner came up with. This has actually been described in legal cases since the early 1800s. I don't know if you know, but Einstein was a targeted parent. He was alienated from his kids. Scientific literature going back to the 1940s describing this abuse before Richard Gardner came up with parental alienation syndrome. The concept of PA has been acknowledged and addressed in English-speaking courts for the last 200 years. So, Tina, I believe you're latching on to Richard Gardner in order to try to use his poor character or whatever to claim it's not real. But this has really nothing to do with one man. It's affecting millions of children, though. He goes on to say, in 2022, the federal government took a firm stance by enacting Cadence Law, which calls for evidence-based training for professionals. A restriction on expert testimony, that's restricting any forensic psychologists or experts on this This is what I was saying about the black and white thinking. She thinks that accusations of alienation mean that alienation isn't real. We do acknowledge and validate that there are parents who attempt and sometimes succeed in turning children against the healthy parent. Say what? I mean, what the heck? This is why she's so confusing. What I take that to mean is we acknowledge that this does happen. I mean, come on, people. Come on. She says when this does occur, we are against utilizing any of the terminology that is co-opted and branded by those in the alienation industry and the father's rights movement. Unbelievable. We need a word, Tina. We need a word. You know, I have to wonder whether this effort trying to get rid of the word alienation, how is that going to help kids who've been through this learn what they've been through? Those children that you admit happens, you admit it does happen, and it sometimes parents do succeed in turning their children against the healthy parent. As you write, you admit it happens. This happens, but you don't want us to call it any of the things that it has been historically called. What are we supposed to call it? What are we supposed to call it? It makes me wonder, and this is all alleged, it's just my thoughts, but I wonder why Tina doesn't want to have a name for the abuse that I went through and millions of other children are currently going through. I wonder why. Is it because knowledge is power, and if you don't have a term to put to the abuse you went through, you won't be able to realize you went through the abuse? I'm just spitballing here because I don't understand why you would not want a term. It just doesn't make sense to me. She claims that these terms are exploited, but if you get a new term, don't you think they're just going to exploit that new term? It's not fair to the millions of victims right now suffering, being withheld from a parent, being made to believe their parent doesn't love them, doesn't care about them, is abusive, being isolated from everyone and being controlled completely by their pathogenic parent. It's not fair to these kids to not give them the terminology that will allow them to learn that they've been living a lie. That's not fair. This is the crux of the matter, she says. Every time a mother uses the word alienation, she advances the father's rights movement. Every time a mother uses that word, she sets our advocacy efforts back and propels very dangerous people forward. There are targeted moms out there. I say it a lot. Anyone with a pulse can alienate. There are a lot of targeted moms out there. And any targeted moms that might be listening to this video, I would encourage you to speak out against this, because Tina Swithin is completely invalidating your experience. She says, the state of our present day court system is a direct result of that word infiltrating the family court system. It's getting worse and not better because of that word. This is a huge generality. She makes these bold claims that are really not true. She says the state of our present day court system is a direct result of the word alienation infiltrating. I don't think so. I think that the family court and everything that is problematic is that it actually assists and enables parents to alienate their children. It's not the word. I don't think it's possible for one word to be the cause of all of the problems in our present day court system. Do you? Leave me a comment and tell me what you think. If your children are turned against you, she says, I beg you not to use the word alienation to describe what's happening to you. And yet she doesn't give us another word to use. Gotta have a word, gotta know what we're calling it. And maybe she does have a point to not use the word alienation in court. That's one thing I will say, that she's probably right about that. See, that's what I mean. Tina is so black and white. She would never say that I have gotten anything right, or that my abuse exists, or that I'm telling the truth about anything. I can say, yeah, Tina got that right. She's right. Don't use the word alienation in court, because right now Tina, and as a social media influencer, is really educating judges on parental alienation not existing. She is running a lot of family court right now from this perspective, which is scary. I would not use the word alienation in court. She's right about that. Many people feel they need a word to use. If you absolutely must have a word, I recommend you read this article about cams. Now, I've done a previous video on CAMS. Do you know what CAMS stands for? This is crazy. CAMS is an acronym that these feminists have come up with. It stands for Child and Mother Sabotage. You can't make this up. So the article that she links to, it says, from parental alienation to child and mother sabotage, CAMS is a preferable term for how perpetrator fathers intentionally sabotage the child-mother connection. Tell me you have a feminist agenda without telling me you have a feminist agenda. Child and mother sabotage? Do you think that it's impossible to have child and father sabotage? You want to change alienation to child and mother sabotage, therefore cutting out the possibility that a mother could commit child and father sabotage. In my opinion, the only reason why you would change it to child and mother sabotage CAMS is to exclude the cases in which the child has been manipulated by the mother to reject the father, which, by the way, is what happened to me. So this is incredibly invalidating. I didn't go through CAMS, but I did go through the psychological abuse currently known as parental alienation. If you cared about all children, you would include all children. That's child and mother sabotage and child and father sabotage. This is a common belief feminists, toxic feminists, have been propelling now for decades. Mothers are not more important than fathers. If Tina had been born a man, do you think she would still be encouraging child and mother sabotage? She says we must unite on this topic. We cannot afford to go backwards. And she also recommends people follow Dr. Christine Cocchiola, which I did a video about her, not even knowing she was friends with Tina Swithin, because in her video she said children do not need a mother and a father. And I was like, whoa, lady. So it's just funny to me that she recommends people follow her, because this lady is also not good. She ends by saying, whether you are new to this journey or a seasoned veteran, my heart is with you and I'm cheering you on, except if you're a man or a child who's been by their mom, because that doesn't happen. I am a firm believer that it only takes one healthy parent to create an atmosphere for children to thrive, and you are that parent. Most people who support her are women just like her, so she's just pumping them up right now as the protective parent. That's what this is. You hold so much power, even when you feel depleted by this battle. Together we are stronger. At the end of the email is a graphic of Harris for president, women for Harris, it says in big bold letters. I don't know what to tell you guys. If this doesn't expose her agenda, I don't know what else will. She wants to change it to child and mother sabotage CAMS because in her head, women are not going to exploit the term. And men obviously can't exploit the term. So this is her solution to get men from exploiting the term alienation in court. I guess my question is this. Tina, you admit in this email that you acknowledge and validate there are parents who attempt and succeed in turning children against the other healthy parent. Do you acknowledge and validate that sometimes there are mothers who attempt and succeed in turning children against their healthy father? Do you acknowledge that? If the answer is no, you are not living in reality, and you're propelling a very dangerous, biased viewpoint. The term you propose, child and mother sabotage, does not recognize all of the children who have been abused by their mothers in this way. Do you realize that? Did you come up with that term because you realized that? I'm about 8 years old. This little girl represents millions of other children currently going through the same thing. You are not only ignoring their pain and their abuse, but you're spitting in this little girl's face. You're telling her what you went through and what you're going to go through for the next 20 years doesn't exist because the UN and the WHO and the whatever hasn't said yes yet. Do better. Do better for all children. This is not any type of wisdom, this limited wisdom. But you are right. There is a great division. You cannot see that you are causing this division. So what do you say to this little girl? What do you say to the millions of children just like this little girl? Do they not matter? Things are starting to change. People are starting to wake up. I'm not giving up. I can't seem to stop, actually. And the children who have been through parental alienation and this severe abuse from both mothers and fathers, we're coming together. We're speaking up. The children are already here. Tina, you're on the wrong side of history, and it's not too late to turn around, but I'd love to hear your response to the children who are trapped right now with their abuse. I know this was a tough video to watch, but I just want to say thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your support. It means so much to me, and please like the video and share it, because this is a really important misinformation to clear up. Leave in the comments below, what do you think? Is this shocking to you? Is it as shocking to you as it is to me? Or do I just have too much hope in humanity? I'll see you next time.